exclusively on Secular Media Network. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once again by my co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari? Really? Really?
This is what happens when we record 2 episodes in one day. I don't have anything pithy to say the second time.
Cool. I'm glad to know how much work you put into the show.
Are you body shaming me? I will have you know that burping is natural and healthy. And in some countries, it is respectful and it shows that you appreciate the food that you're eating.
Yeah, well, I didn't just give you food. So there's, that doesn't work.
The best water that normal Illinois has to offer out of the tap in my apartment.
I'm not sure that's relevant, Ari. And I'm drinking Crystal Light because that and water is basically
a liquid.
It's a thing. Anyways, so this week is going to be the second of 2 episodes that have sort of a youth type focus. Last week we had 2 friends on who just kind of wanted to give us some perspective on their stories, and this week we are going to be talking about the day that trans folks will have at the Supreme Court. At some point next year, which would be awesome, with the person at the center of that case, Gavin Grimm. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me on here. I'm really excited to talk about this, as you say, intersectionality between atheism and the LGBT movement. Yeah,
so this is cool because we were connected by a mutual friend, Kristen, who's a friend of the show. Those who may remember, she was on the Mormon episode as an ex-Mormon. And I was like, cool, like this will be a great interview for the show. And then I look at your profile and you're like, I'm an atheist. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. So Gavin, why don't you just take a minute and kind of tell us your story?
So you did kind of touch on it when you mentioned the Supreme Court aspect of it, but for some background knowledge, for those who might not know, 2 years ago, almost to the dot, it was around like the, I guess, second week in December when the second school board meeting happened. But 2 years ago in November, I had been using the men's room at my school. I had been given permission to do so. I had transitioned in my sophomore year, coming back in my sophomore year as Gavin Grimm, as a male student. Previously, I'd been enrolled as a female student. And I came back and announced my transition to my community. Initially, I hadn't asked for permission to use the men's room. I thought I was rather afraid of my peers' reaction, but pretty quickly I realized I was fine. I didn't have anything to worry about. And so I asked to use the men's room, and for a period of 7 weeks, I did so successfully with no incidents, no problems, no kind of confrontation of any sort. But then in November, regardless of that, a school board meeting was held where they were debating publicly my genitals and the relevance of them to my bathroom usage. This was a publicly facilitated conversation with the members of my community, facilitated by my school board. That night, there was no decision, and then the following school board meeting, which was in the beginning of December, they decided that I was no longer to use the men's room, and instead I had access to either the women's room or an equal private facility, which was their wording, something close to that, and was actually retrofitted broom closets fashioned into unisex restrooms, which I had not at any point asked for. 2 years later, through the legal process, we've made it to the steps of the Supreme Court.
Wow. So, and you initially had permission to do this. I didn't know that.
Yes, I did, for 7 weeks.
And that was something that came down from the school administration, and then the board stepped in? Was that how that worked?
I don't know to what extent the board had responsibility for the initial decision. I don't think their hands were on it. But I was given permission to do so by my principal, and I know some other hands were on it, but I don't know what hands.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so the thing that I'm always curious about, I mean, was this precipitated by people making complaints? Like, were there parents that were like calling the school board and yelling at them? Or was this something the school board found out about and just decided to take on?
They cited complaints by community members. I don't think we'll ever really know the finer details of what went on during those times. It's very strange to me considering it had gone over with no complications. I mean, genuinely, no verbal confrontations, no physical ones, nothing seemed to be an issue from my perspective. And of course, being that it's Gloucester's a fairly small town, a very, very conservative area. I was not so naive as to think that there would be no conflict and think that there would be no opposition to that, even within my peer base. But it didn't seem to be a big deal. It didn't seem like anyone was making a problem out of it. And so the school board meeting, the notification of that came at quite the surprise, and even further a surprise because we were not notified that I was to be on the docket. No one told us. We heard through a friend of my mother's by chance the night before, and that was the only warning we got.
Wow. So yeah, we're going to be talking about this person at our meeting, but like we're not going to let them know that that's the case. God.
We're going to be talking about a minor's genitals in explicit detail, opening the floor to conversation from the rest of the community about that subject.
Holy
but we're not going to let the person know we're going to do that.
Yeah.
I just can't deal with this. How is this appropriate in any way whatsoever? Other than like a medical context. You don't need to be talking about underage people's genitals.
Or really anyone's in general. I mean, it was just
right. So not relevant.
Exactly. And that anyone thought it was appropriate to do publicly. I mean, if there was an issue, since it was such a sensitive matter and such a private and intimate matter for me, that they didn't have, I guess, the forethought to perhaps have it more privately, it does blow me away.
And so did you go? Did you get the chance to talk to them?
I went to both school board meetings. Actually, videos of both of them can be found online. I, however, sound like an insect. My voice was very, very, very weird at that time. And so when I look back on it, it's grating to listen to. But nonetheless, I encourage anyone who's interested to go ahead and do that.
Oh wait, so I think I remember seeing this video, and I don't think I put two and two together that this was you. So it was the video where you're talking and they cut you off because you're out of time, and they just like bend over backwards, thanking you for your courage, and then basically tell you to go to hell. Is that the situation there? Is that the video?
Actually, no, I didn't even get that courtesy.
Oh, okay. So that was because I remember seeing this video, and it was a trans guy who was speaking very openly and very in a very vulnerable way about what all of this means, and like they ended up cutting him off because he ran out of time, which I guess is fair. They probably didn't cut other people off, but and they just were. Oh, thank you so much for your courage. This is very brave of you. We appreciate you doing this. You're so courageous and so brave. And then voted to tell him to go to hell. It was just why? God. Yeah. So you actually got to talk to the school board, and I guess that didn't sway them.
Right, and it wasn't a direct back and forth the way the meetings are set up. You basically go, you say your piece. You're talking to them, but I more than that, I feel like most of the people there were making a case to the community. And then you step down and the next person steps up. And the idea is that all of your complaints are considered. You drop it into that pretty little box, which then gets thrown away after the meeting. Right. Because, of course, their minds are already made up in the beginning.
Right, of course, the hearing and the meeting and all that, it's a formality that like they have to do it because paperwork, but they already really know what they're going to do. So So they came down on this, and then and so eventually you ended up in court, and obviously I know that it's a pending court case. There are probably some things you can't talk about. So as I said before, if we run into any of those boundaries, feel free to just push back. But I'm just curious. So I mean, at that point, did you just be like, okay, fuck it, we're gonna go ahead and sue him? Like, was that? Like...
Well, for me, that wasn't the first thing on my mind. My thoughts were. What are my options? It was, I'm not going to take this sitting down, but what does that mean for me? In what ways can I possibly proceed with a likelihood of success in the outcome? And once I was put in touch with the ACLU, it was very clear that my options were fairly limited, and they were so gracious and kind in reaching out. And so, basically the rest is out there as far as how that went from then on. We went through the court system and the local court and then the appellate court and so now we're here.
And
what was your family like during this whole thing? I imagine that since you were in high school, you would have to have pretty significant support from your family to be able to go through with something like this, which is not something that a lot of trans kids are able to do because their family just isn't supportive.
Right. So my mother and father, of course, they're not without faults, but they've been very good through this process. At least, there's times when they've been very outwardly, actively supportive, and then there's been times where maybe they didn't know how to support me. So what they did was they stepped back and let me take the reins and let me decide for myself what was necessary for myself. And that's also an aspect of support that's definitely invaluable. I do have a twin brother that lives in the home. He's another story altogether. I'll put it that way. It's rather unfortunate. He's kind of fallen into your general, I guess. And actually, you know what? I won't touch that subject. My brother is his own person, and I can't speak for him at all. But he certainly has not given the same kind of output as my mother or father has.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's understandable. And so what was interesting, is also finding out that you were an outspoken atheist, and I'm curious if this has sort of played into any of it, like, because I know sometimes in things like this, like when you're fighting for something that like it shouldn't be related. But, and a lot of times it is, because so often, people's motivations for being anti-trans or anti-gay or anti-anything really is religion. And I'm curious sort of what role that's played. I mean, was it as open as like people, in the school board or in the courts, like talking about God and like what men and women are supposed to be and that kind of stuff? Or has it been more subtle?
I feel the need to... I feel the need to identify myself as an atheist publicly, for example, on my Facebook page and with my Facebook icon, Openly Secular. I feel the need to do this because for me, my journey with religion was one of the longest and most difficult and painful ones that I've ever had. Even on par with the one I'm going through right now, which for some gravity, of course, here I am at the Supreme Court. It's 2 years later, and people can get a sense of what kind of opposition I'm up against. Right. And my struggle with religion it was almost that big. I'll say very frankly, religion almost killed me, and I do credit religion entirely for that. And so with regards to what impact religion has had on the conversation with my pending court case, you mostly see it in comment sections or in ramblings of people who don't really understand the situation. They'll invoke God and their religion and that sort of thing to justify why there's something wrong with me. But if you take a look at the first two school board meetings, not on the administrative level, but certainly with the community members who spoke out, there was an overwhelming religious presence. And in fact, one of the people who spoke out against me at one of the school board meetings, one or both, I can't remember, he is a pastor or a preacher or some kind of something like that, and also a member of staff at my school. I don't know what his official title is, security guard or something like that. But so not only was he an employee of my school, but he's also a pastor or preacher or one of those like religious titles that starts with a P. Right. Not the Pope. That's the only one I can rule out.
Right. He was not the Pope. The Pope was probably not there. Got it. So that was just one sort of good example about as to what kind of presence religion had in the decision making. And if I can ask, and obviously on a personal level, the boundaries are yours to set as well. But I mean, if I can ask, has that gotten pretty bad? Like, I mean, are people like trying to contact you and reach out to you and say awful things and preach to you and that kind of stuff?
Yes, I've gotten some of that. I've gotten some pretty nasty, like, private Facebook messages and
Spreading that love of Jesus.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, I really, really feel the love thy neighbor and all that good stuff there. But I do, and I really wonder what they're trying to accomplish. Because I don't look at it for more than half a second. I mean, it doesn't impact my day. You have 67 new message requests. I pop it up, I pop it back. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll get to that later. And when I say I get to that later, I mean, I'll get to the 50 million positive ones, and completely ignore the rest of them because I don't care. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah.
So what I want to know is, how do they expect this to play out? Do they expect me to read their paragraphs about how God is out there for me, or it'll fix me, or whatever corner they're trying to put me around? Do they expect me to read this and say, "Oh my God, I've been so misled"?
Right.
I had that hole in my soul, and now it's filled, and I'm a woman, and I'll grow my hair out and put my breasts back on and wear a dress. It's like, I don't know what kind of outcome they want. And certainly they don't want a productive one, because I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt in that I don't think anyone is unreasonable enough to think that that's what's going to happen. So they're taking time out of their day specifically to be malicious. I mean, there's no other motivation they could possibly have.
Well, I think a lot of times it's grandstanding. I think I think most people who do that are probably reasonably intelligent enough to know that, like, when they send that, like, 4-paragraph screed about, like, how evil you are and godless you are, that, like, that you're probably not going to come back, like you said, as, oh shit, you know what? You're right. My bad. I think it's grandstanding. It's like, well, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. And that's what it's really about. It's about them saying the thing. It's not about you hearing the thing. It's about them saying it.
Right. They want this sense of, like, accomplishment and purpose, like they've done something good. It's like when people in the school board meeting, they would speak out against me, and they'd bend the structures of their sentences so that they could worm in an extra ma'am, lady, miss, little girl in there.
Oh, God.
And they'd say it with this purpose that sounded like they just gave themselves a dopamine rush, and they just did something so incredibly important, and they just stood up for the sanctity of humanity by calling me a lady. They have such a purpose drive type feeling, and, like, you could hear it in what they said. They thought they were really doing something special, and I was just completely unaffected. I mean, it didn't make me see the error of my ways and grow my hair out, and that didn't happen. So it's the grandstanding is certainly something that I've seen time and time again.
I am super glad that it doesn't bother you, because I tell you, it's not something that happens to me often, but it is something that happens, and I am not.
We need more hate mail.
We
don't get nearly enough hate mail. We're doing something wrong,
right? And that's something that we have discussed on the show. We have a surprising lack of hate mail given the subject matter that we cover. Right. I've had 2 very public callings out of people, like, doing and saying terrible and mean things about me, which it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, I can't brush that stuff off that easily. Oh God, that would kill me. I have a friend who, long story short, like, posted a thing on Chick-fil-A's Facebook page because there was, like, a piece of metal in her food, and she's like, this thing happened, your manager was kind of a jerk, I just wanted my $6 back, so, like, can you help me out here? And she got literally 4,000 private messages, almost all of them saying awful things like, you should probably kill yourself, and your mother should have aborted you.
Over a Chick-fil-A sandwich.
Yes, and there were over 10,000 comments on the Facebook post, and I think I remember her saying there were maybe 10 of them that weren't this just awful vitriolic hatred from people who were supposedly, loving Christians. I guess, like, that only applies to other Christians in some ways. But
this is why I won't be sad when humanity dies off. I will cheer from the heaven that I'll be in. So, I'll be in atheist heaven. Cheering
so Ari's
about
a nihilist.
No more humanity.
We learned that today. Yeah. Well, and I've even heard. I'm trying to remember. It was somebody from the Westboro Baptist Church. The way that their theology works, they actually don't think that preaching will change people's minds, but they're commanded to do it by God anyways, so they do it.
Right.
Like
because this all powerful deity who, I mean, knows everyone and knows everything and blah blah blah, takes time out of its day to have a chat with that family specifically.
Right. Exactly. And it's it's interesting because like the way that their theology works, they believe in predestination. So they like. Everything that's going to be decided about who's going to heaven and who's going to hell, God already has decided ahead of time. So what we do doesn't really matter, but they have to do it anyways, simply because God told them to, which it is so hard for me to understand how people can reconcile that in their heads, because I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that there are people who are part of that organization who are really intelligent. I think we would be being unreasonably dismissive if we just assume they're all idiots, so duh, of course they think like that. That can't possibly be true, so
it's called the opiates of the masses for a reason. I mean, certainly religion, it takes a perfectly reasonable, nice, intelligent person, and it just rewires the brain. I mean, Ken Ham, he's a good example. He's the individual who he was responsible for the ARC experience, this thing, and I think it was Kansas, and it was... Oh,
I gave a 15-minute speech at our rally against the ARC encounter. I am very familiar.
Okay, there you go. So you're very familiar with Ken Ham. He seems, as long as he's not talking about the age of the Earth and similar subjects, he seems like a very intelligent man.
Yeah, super well educated, yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Other than that beard, that was a bad decision.
I think his beard's kind of awesome.
Go away, Callie. No one cares about you. This is my show now. Your opinions are wrong.
Go on, Gavin. Ari, shut up.
No, you're fine. But I mean, certainly you look at people like that and they're very, very intelligent. And so you really can't say, well, of course you're religious, you're stupid. It just isn't like that at all. But that comes back to even in its most benign forms, you take religion in the form that this person, I love all my neighbors and I'm the nicest person you will literally ever meet in your life, and I'm a devout Christian. I still think there's something nefarious about the Christian aspect of it, because what you're doing is you're reading from a book that justified the Inquisition and the murder of millions, and you're saying, well, everyone for years and years and years and years and years have gotten it wrong, and I only now have it right. And I'm going to ignore the baby killing and the rape and the murder and the slavery. And it says to do good things only. And there's something bad about that. There's something wrong about that. Even if you're the sweetest person, the presence of religion there, still there's something wrong with it. I mean, really.
And I'm curious, I mean, how have things been at school since this started? I mean, because, you said you live in a pretty conservative area, so I would imagine, most of the other students in the school are not atheist. So, you being open about your atheism, open about being trans, and now, taking this whole thing through the courts, how has that affected your experience at school, if I can ask?
Yeah. So with regards to my atheism, it doesn't really come up outside of my circles personally. I'm very, 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 very happy to say that everyone in my inner circle is an atheist, which is the most beautiful. Exactly. And it's like, of course, these are all wonderful people. And if they were religious, I think they'd still be wonderful people, but I just don't have to deal with that, which is so nice.
Right.
And I actually, it's kind of shocking to me because they're the people I spend most of my time with. And so to encounter someone who's religious nowadays is kind of shocking. People do think that.
Right.
But so the atheism really hasn't impacted my experience at school, except that one or two people will find out and be like, ugh, and then move on. And that's the end of that. But that's not really a problem. What has had a greater impact has been the court case. And I don't get any real confrontation, but I have this uncomfortable coldness that I'm greeted with now. This, I'll sit down and people pick their stuff up and move to a different seat, or, I'll get stared at in the hallway or people, I mean, it's just very petty. What's that word?
Subtle? Maybe?
Well, subtle, but the stuff like catty girls do. What's that called? Behind your back, there's a word for it. Anyway, it's stuff like that. No one wants to come out and say, here's my problem with you and here's why I have this problem. They'd rather snicker in the hallway and be ridiculous about it. And it's very uncomfortable.
And that's kind of surprising to me. I wouldn't expect that they would be so invested in this thing that literally has nothing to do with them and is not really going to affect them in any way. Well, I guess they think it's going to affect them if they, if the boys have to share the restroom with you in the future. That would be terrible. Right. But I don't know. It just kind of surprises me to hear that it's like really none of their business whatsoever. And yet people are still. Do you think it's like an in-group, out-group thing? Like you're against the school, you're against who we are, so we're against you?
I suppose, and there's also a complete lack of information. I mean, I have people that, they'll say, I don't have a problem with trans people, but what you're doing is bad. Well, then you do have a problem with trans people.
Exactly.
I mean, you totally do. But that's you have less of a problem than, for example, someone who says, I do have a problem with trans people and God hates you and this is why I don't like you. But there's this idea that I'm getting money out of this and that I want attention.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Which, of course,
so much money.
Exactly. I'm like a millionaire and I enjoy the daily national public ridicule. I love it. It's what keeps me going. No, actually. It's publicly available that we haven't asked for money. There's a very, very popular rumor, and it's so oddly specific. I love it. It's that, and it comes in different forms. Either I have purchased a truck with the quote unquote Sue money, or I am forcing the school board to purchase me a truck.
What?
It's just for some reason, I am somehow getting a truck out of this. I wasn't aware of this. I mean, I'm waiting for it any day now because clearly it's coming if so many people are saying it's coming. But that's been a really, really fun rumor because I mean, you have to laugh at it. It's so ridiculous. You have to laugh.
Right. Like, I mean, are you a truck kind of person? Like, do you like trucks?
You know what? My dream car for my first vehicle is a Volvo station wagon, but I do love trucks. I think they're good, reliable vehicles that get the job done, and you can take your trash with them. So as like I'm living alone vehicle, a truck would totally be great. But I'm also a weirdo who wants a station wagon, so
that's fair. But definitively, you're not going to get that truck as a result of this lawsuit.
Right, exactly. If I am to obtain a truck in the future, it certainly will not be through these means.
God, that is hilarious. Like, who comes up with that? Like, I can just imagine some asshole sitting in front of their computer typing like, okay, I got to make something up about this. What am I going to do? Okay, he wants attention. He wants money to buy a truck. That's it.
It's like those Facebook memes. Here's your superhero name. It's your first letter of your first name and the month you were born. Buy truck. Right. And then it's like someone.
Yeah. Gavin God. Truck Grimm.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's incredible. God, like that totally threw me off track. I'm like not even sure where to go from here. Oh, that's incredible. Wow. Fuck. That really did. Like, that totally threw me off. I'm like in the middle of a conversation. I'm like, yeah, this is going really cool. Like, I'm enjoying the talk, and then the truck thing happened.
And then the truck.
Yeah.
Sort of ran over any other thoughts you had.
Oh, did you, Gavin?
Yeah, I did.
Gavin.
I can try to bring it back because I did have I guess a concluding thought about the Westboro Baptist ideology.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Even your quote unquote good Christians, they have a huge problem with that kind of ideology and the predestination and that sort of thing. But I feel like praying is a microcosm of that. It does exactly the same thing. It communicates exactly the same message because generally speaking, it is a part of the Christian ideology to say God knows everything. He has a plan for you. He this, that, and the other. And so, he's got a plan. And I'm wondering, prayer seems to me like it's either expressing doubt in that plan or expressing a lack of competence, because if you're praying, if you're saying, oh, dear God, please let me get this job, right? That's saying, I don't trust you to give me the best outcome for my future. That's saying, okay, well, I know you have this all planned out and all, but can I try to change your mind? Because I really need that job. I mean, it expresses doubt and expresses a lack of trust. And I'm like, that's always been so confusing to me, even growing up. I'm like, why are we praying? This guy's got it figured out. We just sit back and enjoy the ride, or we don't, because it sucks.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. And I've had the same thoughts, even before I watched all the counter apologetics videos on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. That was, a thought that I immediately had. It's well, if you're praying, that means that you don't trust that God's plan is perfect, and you're asking Him to change it for you.
Right.
What a lot of
all-powerful deity.
Right. What a lot of more theologically sophisticated Christians will tell you is that when they pray, they're praying for strength to get through whatever God's about to hand them and that kind of thing. They're sort of praying for help to get through all of that, which is it seems like a cop-out, but at least it's sort of intellectually consistent, if that makes sense.
I was told that it was to build up your relationship with God, and it's so that, you could trust God to do what was the right thing and talk to Him and be BFFs.
Right. God's BFF.
I mean, that's always cop-outs, though. It doesn't, there's something missing in those explanations, though. The mental Olympics that you have to go to arrive at conclusions like that, I mean, when you press on these sorts of topics and the person says these things and they have to think about it, they have to think really hard about it and say, well, how am I going to justify that? Then there's a problem, guy, if you're, or girl, of course.
Or NB.
Or exactly, or NB. If you are thinking this hard about it and trying to justify it and it's not intuitive, it's not right there and easy to speak about it and easy to express, there's a problem.
And I'm curious, earlier you expressed some pretty enthusiastic interest in the sort of intersection of atheism and LGBT stuff, and I'm curious, to whatever extent you're comfortable, because I know you talked about earlier it being pretty rough. Would you mind sort of going a little bit deeper into sort of your relationship with religion and how that sort of intersected your journey with your gender?
Oh, absolutely. So to give background to this, I kind of have to paint my parents as awful monsters, because it was rough back then. But I want to say up front, so that people don't have these ideas of these wonderful, supportive, loving people, that they're very different now. Obviously they are. I wouldn't be able to stand before the Supreme Court. Of course, I couldn't do that without my parents. Being a minor, even just from the legal aspect, if I didn't have my parents' support, this wouldn't be happening.
Right.
But even, on a more personal level, I don't know that I could have gotten where I am without support from my parents. But I grew up in a household where gay was a bad word, not in the sense that, oh, dude, that's so gay, but in the genuine sense that it was a negative thing to be. I grew up in an environment where when I started growing leg hair, and I was very proud of my leg hair, and I didn't want to shave my leg hair, if I wore shorts so that the world could be proud of me as I was of me, because I was thinking that it might work that way. My mother told me that to get back in the car because I'd worn shorts and they might think that her child was a gorilla.
God.
I mean, it was incredibly religiously abusive growing up. And there was other examples. In middle school, I wanted to start a GSA at my middle school, and she had told me, the conversation was, why do you want to be with those types of people? And of course I had to pretend oh no, it's not for me. I have gay friends, and you shouldn't be hanging around with those types of people. And so she said, well, you can do the GSA or you can go to youth group. And I was thinking, 2 birds, 1 stone. Thanks, Mom. I was so desperate for an out, and you just gave me an out in more ways than one. Thank you. And so it rolls around to the time to go to youth group, and she looks at me, why aren't you getting ready? And I said, you gave me an ultimatum and I made my choice. And the part that comes next, I'm positive that in her mind, it was a scene from a bad Hallmark movie, and you could hear the touching music playing in the background. She goes, well, you can go to youth group, but you better wear a hard hat.
What?
And this was to convey that God himself might crush me with bringing the roof down upon my head.
Oh,
Like that was the imagery that I was supposed to evoke. So it was, well, I'll do you this favor, but he's going to kill you. Like,
Jesus.
Right, exactly. And then there was discussions about where my eternal soul was going to go and how afraid my mother was for the possibility of me burning in hell forever because I was myself. So that's really the background you need to know before I continue. So growing up, we weren't the kind of family that went to church Wednesday, Sunday, and whenever else we possibly could. And that really wasn't our reality, but we were pretty regularly in youth groups, both when we were kids, whatever that's called nowadays. It's like daycare, but the religious kind. It has a specific
Sunday school.
Sunday school. There we go. So there was that. Growing up, I was always in Sunday school, and then I did youth group until I kind of aged out of it. And then from there, it was expected that we would find a new church. And I've always been science-oriented, logic-oriented, fact-oriented, and quite frankly, a religious worldview does not line up with these things. I guess I was just not properly anesthetized. But I got these messages from all over, and even though I doubted, and even though there was a level of me that said this is bullshit, there was also a level of me that was this scared little kid that knew I was different, and I knew I was different in a way that directly conflicted with the worldview I'd grown up around. Of course, my understanding of myself at the time, because I was so sheltered from this kind of thought process, was that I was a lesbian. And that was the most terrifying thing. I mean, I was terrified because I did not have any interest in boys whatsoever. From the time I was having crushes on girls. I mean, maybe since I still see some of these people now, it would be a little weird, but I know no one's going to listen to this that I know other than people in appropriate circles. So, for example, neighbors that I had, friends I grew up with, like I can, think of 4 girls right now that I had little crushes on growing up. And the only boy I ever thought I crushed on was because I was like, I totally wanted to emulate him because he was the coolest person I'd ever met. And I was like, I want to be like him. And when you're little and you are expected, you think that the expectation is that you'll have a boyfriend if you're a quote unquote girl, then you don't know how to interpret those feelings. But anyway, I grew up thinking that I was a girl that liked girls, and you're in this mindset. You cannot get out of this trap because here's the thing. God knows everything. He knows what's in your heart. He knows what you're thinking, and homosexuality is a sin. People can try to justify how that's not true. The Bible didn't really say that, or it really meant this. I don't really have the patience for that. I think if you are honest with yourself, the Bible says it's a sin. I don't think that doing the Olympics to make yourself feel better is reasonable, and I don't have patience for it. Right. So growing up, I thought this intrinsic part of myself is sinful, and I'm going to burn for eternity, which is already screwed up. I mean, an eternity of agony for even any of the things on that list.
Right. I mean, it's a screwed up concept, and then when you realize that it applies to you, it's like mortal terror, like literally mortal terror.
Mortal terror. That's exactly what it was. There was an crazy amount of self-hatred and mortal terror. And so first and foremost, you have this layer of, I hate myself. I'm disgusted with who I am. I'm terrified every single day because I can't fix myself. I can't stop being who I am. And I'm going to suffer for eternity because of it. So there's that. And then there's another layer of, because I am so terrified and I hate myself so much and I have no support in this aspect of myself, I can't think about who I truly am, and I can't live authentically. So there was, I hate myself, and I'm not myself. And I was homeschooled a few times because of bullying and because of personal emotional distress because of all of this. And my academics dropped off towards the end of middle school. And I mean, it was just, and they got even worse when this case started happening. And it was so difficult because I didn't have an outlet to discover who I was for a very long time. And it pushed me into a deep, deep suicidal depression. And honestly, if I had not used logic and what I perceive to be fairly common sense to get myself out of that rut, I don't think I would still be here. In fact, I'm sure I wouldn't still be here because I was in some of my darkest days when I was religious. But thankfully, I'm a child of the internet. Right. And so I grew up with that influence and a fairly unmonitored influence as well, which I'm very thankful for. I'm so glad my parents aren't the kind of people that printed out your text history and your email or your emails and internet history at the end of each month and sat there and read them out to you while you were uncomfortable on the couch, right. Like one of my friend's moms. But anyway, I was fairly unsupervised in that, which was a very good thing because if I had constant surveillance, I still wouldn't have been able to figure out who I was. So I was able to sort of Google very rudimentary things. I mean, I remember Googling something like, what if you're a girl but want to have leg hair? Like little, like really, really weird, like kind of simple things like that. And eventually it just came into my circle. As I got more comfortable with liking women, more LGBT themed things came into my circle, and I realized this is not all there is.
Right.
So then once I found a community of people that were accepting of LGBT people, because I had searched for that within religious circles and I did not find it. Once I found that, I realized that it was not scary to admit what I knew all along, which was that there is no God. And I'm not praying to the air is not helping me. It has never helped me. It has never enriched my life. It has caused me fear and pain, and it has stagnated my growth of who I am and who I know I am. And then it allowed me to think more critically about, am I gay? Or a lesbian rather, because I couldn't see myself growing up and being a woman married to a woman. I always saw myself, I would be the husband. I would be, even in the most sort of rudimentary form, I would be the masculine presence in the relationship. And my idea was that there would be the husband and the wife, I would fill the husband's shoes. I would not be a woman married to a woman. I'd be a man married to a woman. And I realized that there was a term for that, and there was hope for that, and there was an avenue for that. And that really saved my life. And it was certainly not a path that was offered to me by religion.
Wow, that is quite a journey, my friend.
If I sound emotional, it's because I just coughed my lungs out and my voice is sniffling because I'm like congested. I'm not moved to tears. I've told the story enough times that doesn't happen anymore.
Oh, well, I mean, it'd be fine if you were, because we encourage that on the show. I mean, Ari hates feelings, but
yeah,
I cry on the show often because I cry generally in life often because that's the kind of person I am. So. No, but I am super glad that you were able to find that community. I know how vital that is, especially, now with things being so public and that kind of stuff, and, all of the negativity being thrown at you, that you've got a good place to land. Obviously, right. You described all the problems with your family. You also were sure to mention that things are different now, and I'm really, really glad for that. And I'm glad you've got a place.
Right.
And I don't know how involved you are in atheist community stuff. But it's an awesome community to be a part of as well.
Right.
The like strictly internet side of things, maybe not so much. a lot of that space is pretty toxic.
Yeah.
But like the sort of community that's popped up around atheist podcasting, generally some pretty good folks. So yeah, you've got a community here too. We're always here to love and support you, and I would absolutely love, and all of that stuff that Ari hates, because Ari hates everything good and wholesome. I'm being really mean today. I'm sorry. I love you, Ari.
I'll blame it on your liquid diet.
That's what, I'm probably gonna do like a sort of like extra little podcast thing about that at some point once this whole thing is resolved. But I would love to have you back on, Gavin, after this whole thing is done. whatever the outcome is, and I know that will allow you to talk a little bit more about specifics surrounding, the lawsuit and that kind of stuff, aside from just generally saying that it exists.
Right. It exists, and here's what's public record, but I'll restate it just because that's all I can say.
Right, exactly. Which is fine. Like, obviously, we don't want to mess that up because it's super important.
Right.
And after this conversation, I can't imagine a better person to be the face of that whole thing. This conversation has been awesome. You rule. I love you to death. You're my best friend now.
I appreciate that. Listen, in the future, anytime, because honestly, I touched on this, but I never really closed this thought earlier. One of the reasons I feel the need to wear this on my sleeve, of course, it was because it was a very important battle to me, but also because people think, oh, well, he's been through so much and he's trans, so of course he's an atheist. He is mad at God and religious. Those darn people that call themselves Christians, but they aren't really, because I'm the authority on that. They've turned him away. They've scared him away.
Right.
I have a lot to say on that, but at its core, I'm not mad at God in the same way that I'm not mad at Santa because my scooter was purple and not red.
Right. I would be mad at Santa.
Listen, I had beef with Santa for a couple years after that, until I realized the real enemy had been my mother that bought me that purple scooter rather than the red one.
So now you're pissed at Mom.
Exactly, and I will never forget that stupid purple scooter.
I give my mom shit every single year because I wanted a trampoline for so long when I was a kid, and we got one literally when I was too old and too fat to have one. So like my brother and sister got a trampoline and I never did, and my mom will be hearing about that for the rest of her life. So like I get it.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll regret it by the time that you're done with her. But that's one thing that I really want to put out there. People think I'm this poor lost soul that got turned away by the big bad, not real Christians, quote unquote. No, I didn't. The pain made me think more critically, sure, but I'm not mad at God. And so I said, he's not real because he's a meanie. I think he's not real because he's not real. I thought very critically and very long and hard about this. It wasn't a shock decision because I was upset, as God is not dead 1 and 2 might have you believe.
Right. Oh, the worst. Well, Gavin, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk about this stuff. I think, I think super highly of you for what you're doing. I know it's not an easy thing to be, that publicly in the spotlight, having that much hate and stuff thrown at you. And I'm super impressed with the grace that you're handling it with.
When's the case going to be heard in the Supreme Court? Do you know?
You know what? I don't recall if there's a specific date. I don't want to say I think because I genuinely don't know. I don't think that there's a specific date set. I think it's a matter of it might happen in this time frame, and that's all we have to go on right now. But I'm not sure about that either.
Gotcha. Well, we will keep up with you. And if there are any more developments or anything like that, definitely love to have you back on. And especially, once a ruling happens and we know the outcome, we definitely love to have you back on to talk about that.
Good luck with potential Trump nominees.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
I will be praying to the flying spaghetti monster for you.
All right. Let him know I said, hey.
Yeah. Tell him I said sup.
We're best buds.
Well, Gavin, I know you're not like a podcaster or blogger or anything like that, but I always like to give guests at the end of the show to give a chance to promote or plug something. If there's a nonprofit that you really believe in, a project that you really believe in, anything like that you want to talk about at the end of the show, and whatever parting thoughts you may have.
So I have a public Facebook page. You can find me at Gavin Grimm. Feel free to drop by, say hi. Leave the page a like, share the page with friends. The more the merrier. We love community. I love community. And I guess my parting thought would be, as far as community, there's not really an accessible local community. And so right now I'm contained to only online, and because, it's not great. I don't experience a lot of it. But I'm always, always, always open to more community. I can never have enough community, and specifically the atheist community is not one I ever get to interact with, and this being one of my only forays into it so far, I've really enjoyed myself.
Oh, do I have some things for you, my friend?
Yeah, we will hook you up. We know all the people.
Yes, we will talk offline, but absolutely, yeah, we've definitely got some things for you there. So
sounds good to me.
I'll hit you up. We'll get you into some Facebook groups and get you in contact with because like I said, especially the community that surrounds atheist podcasting. Some of my favorite favorite people that I know. Super loving and supportive people.
Such as myself.
Well,
Say yes. If you don't say yes, you sound like an asshole.
yes, Ari, just like you. Anyways.
You're like, oh, Gavin, you're the best. You're the greatest guest ever. This was great. Ari, you're the worst. Go away. I hate you so much.
Ari, I genuinely love you. And I was bragging. I forget to who. I was bragging about you the other day, actually. And I can't remember. Oh, it was on an interview that I did for another show. And I continually say, I mean, if we're going to go there, if you're going to goad me into complimenting you, I still to this day think that bringing you on the show is the best decision that I ever made about the show because I genuinely think that you're awesome. So, I just give you crap because that tends to be how we communicate, and that's fine.
I'm going to do what my therapist says and try to internalize that and say thank you and not push that away.
It's always either very bad or very good when your therapist knows your friends by name.
Right.
It's not just Callie, okay? I have a problem with compliments in general. It's a problem.
Well,
but especially Callie, because she's just, how she be.
I'm not sure how to take that. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. Definitely, again, want to thank our guest Gavin Grimm for his time, for his insight, and for being so open about all the things that he's been through. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at Gaytheist Callie. You can find the show on Twitter at Gaytheists. And Ari, did you skip the outro like you did the intro there, champ?
Oh no, don't you worry. It's coming. The mind is the womb of unbridled phenomena. Existence is at the heart of total acceptance of choices.
Oh God.
Imagination constructs quantum experiences, and this key to joy is inextricably connected to dimensionless photons found on Ari Stillman's Facebook profile. God is only possible in the progressive expansion of actions. And when you email aristillman4@gmail.com, your consciousness is a reflection of formless neural networks. Eternal stillness, much like the SJW circle jerk, complements an abundance of sexual energy. Always remember, my child, that the experiential truth unfolds through reckless love. Love, Deepak.
I was going to say, it sounds like Ari spent like 3 hours on the Deepak Chopra quote generator.
It was actually more like 10 minutes, but yeah, it was the Deepak Chopra quote generator.
If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can go to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. Make a per episode donation to help us out as little as $1 per episode. Everything helps. If that's not doable, you can always head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us get heard by a lot more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.